Hello, how's everybody tonight? This discussion. It looks like Mike is getting connected. He might be having some connection issues. We were just waiting on him to start, but since he is having some connection issues, I just wanted to welcome everyone to this space for this discussion on hard work. Okay, great. Awesome. You're here. Awesome. Cool. Okay.
We got it. We got it.
Hey,
Awesome.
hello,
Well, I
Micah.
was welcoming everyone to the space. It looked like you were having some trouble, but take it away.
All right. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. It's definitely a global community here. I think 6 a.m. for me, I think Meow as well, and afternoon in the West Coast and late evening in Europe. So I always appreciate our global community making time to tune in. So today's I would say a pretty special Twitter Spaces where we have Andrew Lee with us, as well as Meow, some early contributor. And discussion, as you can see in the title, is called Hard Fork Discussion. And it's definitely stirred the pot in the community. And, I think it's generally been a healthy discussion. I mean, I think, while there's a little bit of emotions, of course, I mean, it means we all care about Handshake and we all care about the future of this protocol as well as the internet and the decentralized web. So I'm really proud as a director or as a community member of Handshake to see all this healthy discussion. So I just want to start off with that. Also, another little announcement is Meg's Machine, you may have seen, is also doing a Twitter Spaces because NamesCon is happening right now. He's there and a few others representing Handshake. So there will be another Twitter Spaces in a few days. The idea is this one could be setting some ideas, hearing from Andrew and others in the community, and then maybe it can also, that one could be a little bit more of a open discussion as well. Of course, we welcome people here to ask questions and engage, but that could be like a follow-up Twitter Spaces. So definitely make sure, if you haven't seen it, check out Meg's Machine. If we can pin that tweet, and so that people can see that and register or set the reminder. So we have with us, I believe we have Andrew. You here?
Yep, I'm
All
here.
right, great. And Meow, do you want to do a little test? Are you here? I know it's early for you.
Hello, how's it going?
All right, great. Great. So maybe we start with a quick little intro. I know, Andrew, people are familiar with you. You're Andrew Lee from the Purse. I know you even said there's a naming collision because there's two Andrew Lees in the founding team. So you're Andrew Lee from the Purse IO. And do you want to just give a little intro for people here?
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Yeah, I think this is an important discussion that we get kicked off. I don't have any hard opinions about this discussion, but provide, perhaps I can provide some insights into kind of the motivation for kind of the airdrop and what potential adjustments we could or could not make, and kind of going forward. But yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thank you, Mike, for hosting this.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andrew. And Meow, do you want to? I know some people are curious to learn more about yourself. If you're willing to share and introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I was involved in Handshake since the very early days, where I worked with the guys on it. And I think specifically, the part that I was really kind of focused on was an airdrop, right? And about kind of how to do it in a way that would drive the most amount of adoption, right, and interaction of Handshake. Yeah, so I think, and that's the reason why I'm here. I think it will be fun to kind of like bring up some, discuss with Andrew. So I've been discussing this with Andrew for a fair bit about kind of like how to move Handshake forward. And I've also written about Handshake before with Andrew and another contributor called Cassandra about how Handshake can be used more broadly, not just for DNS, but also kind of like a naming system, right, for the decentralized web. I think I think this hard fork is going to be very important, right, because it would almost almost certainly be the main determinant, right, of like what direction, right, Handshake's gonna go, right, not just from a technical direction, but also from a community and organizational level, right. So I think yeah, I thought it'd be great to come here and share some ideas, right, about where I think can go. Yeah, I think so on my end, I think I've been working on mostly in decentralized finance, right. I currently run like one of the largest like decentralized exchanges, right, called Jupiter. We are the largest like decentralized system on Solana, right, and also kind of like one as well as pretty prominent on the web as well. Yeah, so that's what I do now. Mhm.
Great. Thank you, man. That's awesome. I appreciate the background myself. So maybe a good way to start is Aaron AOX. I don't know if he's also on the space. He's at NamesCon right now, so he may not join, but he's been sharing around in various channels leading up to this call about there is a hard fork happening, or maybe someone can help me define hard fork. There's like interchange about soft fork, hard fork, but I'll just read exactly what he says. This was like a few hours ago. Nodar, I believe, Node CH, has been working on a soft fork that disables claims for ICANN and optionally top 100. The fork needs to start signaling very soonish to have 6 months to be safe. He is making it as safe as possible to avoid any risks with hard forks. He is only one person, so the focus is to do the minimum to freeze ICANN/100/custom. There is not enough time or consensus to risk delaying this further. The coins and other stuff can be discussed, but any other changes will need to wait for January 2024 after this fork is rolled out and any links to a GitHub. So I don't know if someone wants to help me maybe explain that to people here. That's basically, I think there's full consensus about extending name claims for top sites. And I think everyone's always agreed on that discussion.
Yeah, well,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, let me provide some maybe some a little bit of background. So I think the why now kind of question, why we're all kind of here discussing this topic is for two reasons. One's kind of technical. There was the top 100,000 Alexa names as well as existing gTLDs and such were reserved on the Handshake blockchain, and the reserve period expires I guess in about 6 months or so, and so yeah, I think there's general consensus amongst the community that we shouldn't let that expire. I mean, the implications of letting it expire would be that like anybody could start kind of bidding on names like .google, .apple, .facebook, and generally we kind of don't want to see that happen. So I think there's yeah, and to your comment, I'm not entirely sure. I was under the impression that extending that claim period for the top 100,000 Alexa names would result in a hard fork, but I could be wrong there. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that assumption. And then secondarily, like I mean, Handshake has always been kind of I mean, it's been an experiment, and part of that experiment was the airdrop, and so let me and so some of the motivation and rationale behind the airdrop is, well, yeah, I understand that, like Bitcoin and things like that. Bitcoin didn't have an airdrop, and so like there may be some kind of sentiment around like, hey, we don't have to do anything because Bitcoin didn't have to. But Bitcoin was first, right? It was novel. You can only really do that once. And so if you're a project that's coming after Bitcoin, you have to you should kind of consider and think about ways to bootstrap the community, and really kind of kickstart like the adoption cycle. And 3.5 years in since launch, the open source claims to individual open source developers, that has been it hasn't been kind of what we expected, and there's a large amount of coins that are still reserved for open source developers to claim. It may result in maybe something close to 50% of the current Handshake supply. Handshake coin supply. And so, so now knowing, 3.5 years. So what's kind of odd about the situation is that by design, the open source developer claim, that was kind of infinite. Like, the open source developers could kind of claim that anytime, and 3.5 years in, it's unclear whether open source developers will claim at all. So so it would be kind of interesting to see that expire, and if we do let it expire, could we reallocate it in some other fashion? In hindsight, maybe it could have been the other way around, where the Alexa top 100,000 Alexa names in the gTLDs, we let that be claimed infinitely, and the open source developers claim expire at a certain point, but we had and it was inverted, and that inversion, in terms of like the expiration date around these things, wasn't intentional. I believe that the kind of the decision around that had to do with kind of the security, the cryptographic security around how long we could trust these keys to be safe. Again, like, this is more like JJ's kind of field than mine, but it's my understanding that, like, SSH keys on GitHub have high, kind of like a higher security, lower risk type profile than the keys that hold the like domain names, especially like the gTLDs. I could get this wrong, but I think some of the gTLD keys are held in like SHA-1 and things like that. And 3.5 years ago, it was very unclear whether some of those cryptographic schemes would get broken at some point or not. And so it was merely based on, in terms of like how we structured this by design, the original design, how we kind of thought about the claim expiration period for these two groups. A lot of the thinking was more based on the cryptographic security, more than kind of like the adoption cycle. And so right now, I think, with the timing, with name claims, potentially expiring in 6 months, I think it's a good time to kind of have this discussion within the community. Does that make sense?
All right. No, I get it. I understand. Yeah, it's interesting about the inverse. Vida, are you there? Do you want to?
Yeah, I think
go ahead, Meow. Go ahead.
I think to add on to what Andrew is saying, right? I think it's very important to have this discussion now, right? The reason is that, precisely because I sort of said, right, it's like Handshake is a decentralized community that isn't like either a strong character or a very strong foundation to drive it forward, right? So it's actually exceedingly hard to gather the motivation, right, for this discussion, right? So I think the fact that I think something is happening soon, right, aka the expirations, I think that's actually an amazing chance, right, to kind of have a discussion, about the hard fork, right, about the treasury, about the airdrop, right, the unclaimed airdrops, because I think if we miss a chance, I think it might be very long later, before we can have this discussion again, right? So I think I would definitely so I'm very grateful for the discussion and the timing, right? And I think that it's important to kind of like to use the chance, right? To do that. Yeah. As for what Andrew and what that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that I think what's actually really important here is to think about the original motivations, right? Of the airdrop, right? The original motivation of airdrop was actually really based on the hypothesis, right? I think, as Andrew mentioned earlier, it's an experiment, right? A hypothesis that, like, okay, if we do this like airdrop to the community, right, then something will happen, right? Then we will see a mass growth of developers, right? Adopting Handshake, right? Including Handshake into their protocols, right? Into their apps. So I think so the question one to ask ourselves is that has that happened, right? Has that airdrop resulted in a large amount of developer interest, right? Sustained interest, by the way, not just claim and dump interest, right? Right, right. And certainly from my certainly from my interactions, right, with people who are like not deep in Handshake, right, it has been most people don't know about it. And then if they do know about it, it's not like, yeah, I claimed and sold it, or find ways to sell it, right? So there wasn't that. I think what was a bit disappointing was that there wasn't that the adoption, right? From the regular developers, right? Or interest that as we've seen. I think so. That's the first question I think we should ask, right? Like, has that worked, right? And the third and the question is that, okay, if it has worked, if we think that it really hasn't had the effect that we wanted to, right? Then okay, then as a community, right, are we okay revisiting, right, past decisions, right? Is that something we want to do, right? I think that is a really important one, right? Right? And because that would in some sense be the first time the community would take a decision to do something, right? Around tokenomics. And personally, and speaking from a very practical point of view, right? I mean, we're in crypto, right? So there's definitely the question of a supply overhang, right? AKA having a large amount of token in the market, right? It's always gonna pose a potential dumping question, right? What if Handshake becomes a lot more prominent, right? And everyone claims and start dumping it, right? So I think having more supply certainty about what is happening, with their supply, could actually be really interesting, right? For Handshake, yeah. And lastly is that I think and one last thing I'll share here is that I think we can also consider okay, 3.5 years in, right? We can if you're revisiting assumptions, right, around did the airdrop work, right? And another obviously the other very major assumption was DNS, right? It's like, okay, the entire premise of Handshake was not DNS. However, I think the naming is a very widespread problem, right? It's not just DNS. Every single entity on the internet, right, needs a name. And it's true whether and especially true for certain things like decentralized social networks, right? And so one of the most interesting decentralized network that is it's a service called Nostr, NOSTR, and that protocol is probably the most, I would say, Handshake aligned, right? Social protocol compared to like Mastodon or or Farcaster, right? Which is very different. So I think I encourage everyone to check out Nostr. I can also explain this a bit more on the call. But basically what me and Andrew was kind of brainstorming, right, was that Nostr actually has a really big active user community, right? And most of them don't have names, right? The naming system in Nostr right now is kind of broken. It is either dependent on, it's basically reliant on the user linking their website, or having a temporary relay specific name. But Handshake could provide the Handshake could actually be the naming system, right? For Nostr, right? Which would obviously be a really perfect match, right, in terms of use case and alignment. And I think so if the airdrop can be used for that purpose, right? That could actually be interesting, to drive adoption among that specific community, right? So yeah, I think in summary, I think a few things I think we can discuss. Number one, I think, is this the right time to record to talk to airdrop? I think it is, because I think if we don't do it now, I think it might be a long time before we can do it again, right? Given how things work. Second thing is that is it okay to I think we have to revisit some of the assumptions that were the motivations, right? As Andrew very, very nicely articulated earlier. And thirdly is that I think we can also look into kind of having a more specific use case, right? For the airdrop coins, because without a more specific reason to unlock it, right? It might just go, okay, it goes to foundation, and then what? So I think so that those are my current thoughts on things.
Yeah, just to elaborate a little bit, I mean, I think our decision tree here is, one, just let I don't think anybody wants to see like just the 100,000 Alexa names and such just like become claimable. So I mean, assuming that's the case, I mean, I guess the base case scenario is like a hard fork that extends the name claim period for the 100,000 Alexa names. One thing that we could maybe add to that, I mean, if you took it a little bit further, is and I think that's what Aaron was mentioning. Maybe through a soft fork, you could expire the open source developer names. So that could be like the second. I think, I mean, from conservative to more, I guess, like like radical, I guess, in terms of like the changes that could be made just from a protocol level. I think the most conservative change would just be, again, like extending the name claim period for the gTLDs and 100,000 Alexa names. And then next case, like in terms of the conservative spectrum, is picking an expiration date for the open source developers. But then if we just stop there, right, then we're not like there isn't still like we're lacking a mechanism to kind of further adoption and such, right? And so another proposal I've heard is we reallocate those coins to a DAO. Some of the issues with that, or some of the challenges with that, is I mean, one of the key kind of tenets, I believe people were, the existing community is really interested in Handshake, is kind of like the decentralized nature, that a foundation doesn't exist, and that would make it a lot like a lot of other crypto projects, which I'm not for or against it, but I'm just kind of like outlining kind of some of the criticisms around having some kind of foundation. And I think what Ming's discussing is keep with maintain kind of the decentralized kind of ethos and tenets around Handshake, but just reallocate it to a different group. And so like such as something to Nostr, or potentially other applications, other decentralized applications as well. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of, yeah. Go ahead.
So yeah, so I think thanks Andrew, thanks Andrew for bringing it up. I think that priority of sequence is very important. So I think realistically speaking, right? I think for this, I think as we mentioned earlier, there's a certain like time crisis here, to get this done. So I think one thing that could be done, right, is that we set the expiration date for like a year or something, right? So that actually mean, because I don't think it is. I think it'd be very hard to get to a fast decision around how the funds are going to be used, right? But I think it could be very acceptable for everybody to set the to have an expiration, right? For the unclaimed tokens, right? And then which means that the community have 1 year, right? To figure out kind of like, okay, how we wanna use this like 50%, right? Of the supply, right? Do you want to burn it? Do we want to burn it? Do we want to like DAO? Do you want to work with or do you want to kind of work with a new group of, or do you want to work with a new community, right? Such as Nostra or something else, right? To kind of drive adoption there, right? So I feel like one thing we could consider doing, right, is to split up the airdrop decision, right? Which is there are two, right? Do we expire the token, the claim, and secondly, what to do with it, right? Maybe we can say, okay, let's give ourselves. Maybe we can say, okay, let's let it expire. We set it 1 year period for it to expire, and then we give ourselves 1 year, right? To figure it out, which I think is a good time. Which I think is a good timing, right? And the other thing is that I think it could also be the spark, right? If there's an expiration period, it could also be the spark for all these open source developers to actually start claiming it, right? Especially now because Handshake actually has made a lot of progress, right? With the new adoption by a Namecheap, and other TLDs, and also when Handshake started, the overt the decentralized social protocols were not a thing, but now they're a thing now, right? So people might actually be much more aware of the need, for something like Handshake. Yeah, so I think I do think that if there is I do think that if we can agree on an expiration period, for the airdrop tokens, for airdrop, and then give ourselves a year as a community to figure out what to do with it, right? That can be a good way to approach, and also like spark a lot more urgency, more urgency and interest, more like three things, right? Number one, it will give a lot more people. It will give the community. You revive the community in because there's a clear thing to discuss. Because there's a clear kind of treasury now, not really treasury, but clear pool now, right? To decide to do. Secondly, I think it would make Handshake relevant again, right? And thirdly, obviously, I think it would create a lot more urgency among open source developers, the original target, to be involved. Yeah.
So I have a question, and just to summarize, this is Vita, by the way, but just to summarize what I think you all are saying for the community is the case for the hard fork would be to generate more interest from devs to claim, and also to start developing, on the platform or on the protocol. Is that correct? One.
Yeah, the dev focus. Well, okay. So just kind of going back into things that we did this airdrop experiment, and if we do an experiment, we should try to draw some conclusions from it too, right? So as part of this experiment, a big ethos in the airdrop was giving without expectation of return, this open source developer, like the GitHub, like the airdrop to the GitHub developers. I think what was kind of what I think I learned since the Handshake launch is that perhaps that's not the best mechanism for airdrops or things like that, because we are kind of expecting something in return, right? But like giving it without giving, whether it's fiat or coins, this whole notion of like giving to a group that's not even asking for it, I think there may be some flaws with that kind of concept. So I would strongly urge, as you guys kind of think about different groups to kind of give to avoid situations where you're just like, hey, blindly giving to a certain group that's not even asking for it, or that's not proving that they're going to be interested, or something like that.
I'll add on to that, right? I think it is one thing that they not interested. I think the other thing is that I think that it wasn't clear what to do with it, right? Or where what the path to adoption was, right? So per what Andrew is saying, I think the coins definitely has to be used by a group that has a keen awareness, right? Of how to use it, how it's going to be used, right? Yeah. So I think I think and one thing that Andrew said is very important, that it's an experiment, right? And then we should draw some conclusions, as a community, Yeah. So I think that conclusion drawing, I think, is very important, for a community to move forward on this specific point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to jump in about that, because we did bring in some developers from the airdrop. I believe Fernando has said a few times he heard about Handshake from the airdrop, and he got the GitHub, I believe, and maybe Rithvik. There's a small group of good core developers that did get the airdrop, and it did work. I think do what the founders or the idea was. But I do have some developers personally I brought in through the GitHub, and they some didn't have the keys. I think we should maybe bring it up. I think a lot changed their SSH keys, and they weren't able to get the claim, and they didn't save their old keys. So they qualified, but they couldn't get them because they didn't have that key at that time. But those that did have it and did claim it, they sold it. And I was trying to kind of keep them involved. I tried to bring them into telegrams, etc. And they said, they're busy with other projects. They like this project. They'll try to like integrate it in their future projects, or they'll try to come back when they have time. And they did appreciate it. And like you said, there was no expectation. There was no requirement for them to contribute. But as far as some points that I want to bring up from what I've noticed with the airdrop for the GitHub developers
Yeah,
the last few years.
I definitely want to I agree with Michael here, right? I think okay, so here's the thing. I've been involved in many airdrops, right? Both as a recipient and also as an advisor and my own thing, right? Whatever, right? So I'm very familiar with airdrops, right? And then with airdrops, it's always like you should always expect like 90% to sell it, right? And that's fine because the whole point of the airdrop is actually for that 10%, right? So I think it's definitely great that like the initial airdrop did bring in a bunch of core developers, right? Which without whom there's no handshake community now, right? So I think that part is great. What to consider here is the timing, right? Yes, in 3 years, right? And definitely I think whoever wanted to claim will have claimed it, right? So now it really is about let's give the remaining set of people a time to claim it, right? But after this time, it can be a year, or something, or maybe 2 years. But I don't think it's 2 years. For me, it'll be 1 year to claim it, and let's start a new chapter, right? So I think that is actually kind of like my personal feeling on this thing. Yeah, I think what as for Michael said, I think it's very important to acknowledge that the original airdrop did work, right, to a certain extent, right? And then becomes okay, what do we do next? Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
and to the original question, to your original question, I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to be developer focused this time around. I mean, things that are kind of tangential or anything. I mean, other ideas behind Nostr, like could be just giving to centralized identity or centralized entities that could add value. So some of the things that have been discussed that I've seen discussed on Telegram was like like Brave, for example. But basically, there would be, if we were to give more coins to Brave, that that there is some kind of reciprocal kind of agreement where they're going to kind of integrate Handshake or exchanges like Coinbase or something. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to go into one place or to even one group like developers or anything like that, or even just Nostr. I think the community could come like kind of find like a broad set of recipients that could that have that already know. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, as opposed to giving it to just one centralized DAO or foundation and entrusting them with 50% of the coin supply, I think that's kind of like a suboptimal kind of conclusion to all this. It would probably be like up to the community to kind of find a set of recipients, and kind of continue this experiment with the
But
unclaimed.
and do you think that this is my personal feeling is that is probably, I think, figuring out how to use the coins, I think is probably almost out of this hard fork decision. I feel like this hard fork decision should be kind of like easier in the sense that maybe the community can decide to just expire the airdrop, right? And
No, I
then
think that's perfectly
yeah,
reasonable. Yeah, I mean, I think to Aaron's
yeah.
discussion, if we
Mhm.
are going to do hard fork, maybe we don't have enough time or what have you. But maybe by the time, so from 6 months from now, maybe we should have some concrete. The community itself should have at least some kind of mechanism to formulate some kind of concrete ideas, so that from six
Yep,
months from
yep,
now,
yep.
we're like pretty close to consensus. Yeah, in terms of timing, to try to rush a hard fork out that does all of this might be premature. I know, and I agree with you on that. We should probably buy some time. But at least start thinking about how to distribute the coins. And then another thing that could be interesting is like, maybe by that time, people who can prove that they're using Handshake in some meaningful way. I know so a lot of the TLD owners like .x are in here, or anybody that's already like on chain, any way to kind of give back to the people who were already
Yep,
building on
yep,
Handshake.
yep,
I
yep,
think
yep.
that could be really interesting.
Yeah,
Because
mhm, 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 mhm.
So
yeah.
for
So I mean,
I
I
completely
don't
agree
have a
with that.
specific idea in mind. I'm just kind of like throwing out
I
ideas
think
here.
I think it's also time to I think it's also a really good chance to like look at who actually has been involved, right? Right? Like for example, I think this ranges from like a lot of the community contributors to a lot of like organization nameship who have actually pushed Handshake pretty hard. You know, so I think I agree, Andrew here. Mhm.
So for clarity, are you saying that a hard fork is would be required or necessary if you wanted to extend it, and then a soft fork would be required, or if you wanted to implement an expiration date? Is that right?
So I think, and I could be wrong. I think that I think there needs to be a hard fork like 6 months from now, to extend the name claims for the Alexa 100,000, and then the gTLDs. And as a part of that, I didn't mention, I think this has been discussed, is maybe letting like the number 10,000 to 100,000 expire, but just keeping the top 10,000, because after the 10,000, there's a lot of like less popular websites on there, and maybe maybe, I mean, those are like some kind of details that should be worked out. But yeah, I think to your question, I think there needs to be, I mean, I think the idea is to discuss some kind of hard fork to extend the name claims for at least the top Alexa 10,000 or 1,000 or what have you, and the gTLDs, and then I think what Ming's proposing here is as part of that hard fork or through a soft fork, expiring the open source developer name coin claims, maybe like a year from now, and then that buys us about 6 months to decide on how to reallocate that.
So I have a question also with regard to the top, say 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever, in terms of use cases and getting some of these folks interested or educated about Handshake. Do you think it might be a good idea for people like yourselves and like-minded folks who are who know the intricacies of Handshake and how it works in the protocol, and some of probably the best uses for some of those companies on that list, to kind of come up with some ideas about use cases? Well, you just referenced Brave browser or whatever, and then with committees that maybe we can form to start engaging these entities with these use cases to get them interested in claiming and also trying to implement using the protocol, like because it just seems like just to extend it just for extension sake without actually actively engaging people, it just seems like more of the same.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to be us necessarily to do it. I mean, I think there's plenty of people in the community that are familiar with the protocol, and that are much more familiar, like that probably have good ideas for the top one Alexa websites on what to do once they kind of claim their name. I mean, but I don't. It's not like but I mean, from starters, like I think the primary motivation for them to do this is if there is a new namespace for the internet. I mean, and I don't know how many of these entities are even aware of Handshake's existence, but and so I think engaging them would be a really good start. But I mean, I think if they knew about it, I think they would, and that it wasn't too difficult for them. I think getting them to claim it, just from a risk perspective, obviously, like if there's a new internet, Facebook will want .facebook. I think, getting him to claim them is I think there's one set of incentives or motivational factors. Getting them to use it in useful ways. I think, yeah, I mean, but again, yeah, to your point, I think, members of the community engaging with them, I think would be a huge value add.
Yeah, and also to your point, right? I think what we are really talking about here is the forcing, which is why it's so interesting, right? Because this hard fork decision, right, involves a forcing function, right? It's a forcing function, right? It's a forcing function for everybody, right? For a community to come together to decide what the future is, right? For these companies to, especially those from 100 to 1,000, to potentially start claiming it, right? And also, for the developers to, if there's expiration, for developers to actually start doing things, Yeah, but so I think I would encourage like everybody to think of this almost like a forcing function, right? For the community, for the entities that might have their stuff getting expired, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so just to try to get some recap, or at least what I'm also interpreting is I mean, by saying it's going to expire, get your names, get your airdrop, hopefully that'll be like a last call, and it also could be a marketing campaign. I know Vita's got marketing experience and wants to help with marketing for Handshake. This could be a campaign, right? That, hey, last call, airdrop, for GitHub, or name claim coins.
Andrew actually said something interesting. Andrew said that maybe the 1 to 10,000 is like we don't want to touch it, right? No, because the moment we touch it, the moment people start like getting a handle of those handles, then it's over, right? But then, it's not over. Like I think if a spammer get access to .google, that's like really bad. But I think his point, to iterate, to kind of jump on something that I found interesting there, was that his point is that, okay, maybe it's not so bad if we let the 10,000 to 100,000 expire, right? Right? And yeah,
Yeah.
I think, and give them some impetus to claim. Yeah.
I don't know how others here feel, but I feel burning the coin, maybe just let them get the name, even for Google or ICANN. I think they've had 4 years to get the name and a coin, and I think some of them are actually aware of us, so they could still get their names, but they can't get the coin. Is kind of how I feel is fair.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think for me anyway, right? I think breaking apart the name reservation. And by the way, just to be clear, in big companies, actually the money stuff is a big problem, by the way. In the sense that it is not clear, every time you want to give money to a big company like this, like kind of who gets it, where does it go, everything becomes extremely complicated, So even for the sake of making it easier for people, right? It could also be good to just to break it apart. Yeah. Yeah, but I completely agree with you. I think the coin allocation for them and the name and the reserving the name, I think those are two different things. Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think a lot of us are feeling that way. Like, no, I don't think anybody wants to see .google go to some anybody but Google, so, or whichever other names there might be in those top 1,000 or so. So, but yeah, I think the money part, like you said, actually, I've heard the same people saying companies can't claim the name because there's that money or coin attached, and like you had just said, they don't know what to do, or it's complicated in a company about the financial part. So I feel a lot of us are agreeing with this.
Do we mind if I hop in for a sec?
Sure, Max, go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone. First of all, the space is really awesome. Thanks for putting it together. Also, First Names Con's been really cool, and appreciate Andrew and Meow taking the time. My understanding here is that we have a couple different issues. I think it's really important that we separate them as much as we think about all of them holistically. One thing is that we have to do some sort of fork, either a soft fork or a hard fork, because we need to extend the ICANN gTLDs, or the ICANN TLDs, right? The .coms, the .nets, the .orgs. That needs to happen. We also have these 100,000 Alexa domains, and a lot of people haven't claimed them, and they're probably not going to claim them, maybe not a significant amount between now and the next 6 months, which is the time that we have to execute this fork. And forks as I understand it, take time to execute, to propose and to execute. I know that some people here that are here presently right now have voiced this in the past, but the urgency wasn't there. So we have the groundwork, and I haven't heard a single person say anything against reserving the top ICANN TLDs. So I think we've come to consensus on that. I also think that although maybe we cut down the top 100,000, maybe we don't. Maybe there's good proposals for what we can do with the funds. Maybe there aren't, but we can probably address that later. So in terms of urgency, the ICANN TLDs need to be reserved, and probably in the same boat in terms of urgency, it's probably best to just stick with the 100,000 with the coins there, and ensure that we can get this fork executed, and then through the rallying of the community and Twitter Spaces like this, and the continued efforts that we're doing, we can come up with plans and proposals for what to do with those funds. Should we reduce the TLD count, or maybe separate the coins from the claimable TLDs. All of those things are on the table, I think, but there is a sense of urgency, which is we are 6 months from the time when that expiration date comes, and it takes time to implement forks. So I wanted to. That's my understanding. Please correct me. Anybody who wants to correct me.
Maybe I'm not sure if he came in later, but at the very beginning we read off what Aaron had been sharing around in various groups, AOX, which was it's being done by Nodar, and they strongly recommend we just focus on extending the names and not talk about this, coin part, and it should be ready by January 2024, and it seems like it's on track by Nodar. So I think there is, and Andrew said, I think there's full consensus in extending even I'm not sure how to say it. There's a couple parts, right? There's the Alexa 100K, but I think we want to reduce that. And then there's, of course, like ICANNs and the TLDs. But I think that's happening now. It's being done by Nodar, and it will be done by January. So it should be able to be done, I believe. That's all. Everyone's on the same page.
Okay. I think that's great. Awesome.
So I think what's kind of even just kind of been discovered during this call is, we should still, of course, discuss the second part. I guess it would be a second fork. I'm not sure if what we're calling hard fork, soft fork, but this would be I think the majority of this discussion is about money, because of course makes everything more complicated. And so we're talking about what to do about the coins from like GitHub and even the name claims. So Andrew outlined 3 different ways, or maybe it was Meow, burn, DAO, or reallocate to different kinds of communities, such as GitHub, which might have not worked. Maybe No Star. I've also been meaning to say Blue Sky, because Zach at the Shake has done a lot of work with Blue Sky. But maybe reallocating that GitHub to other types of communities that might be more focused on naming, that would more easily or more likely understand and use the names or the HNS coin to buy names. So I think that was Meow that said maybe the GitHub was too broad, and we can kind of reallocate those to focus down towards a community that would use names, which is something I'm kind of liking out of those 3, personally.
Okay. Curious to know if the guests today are interested in taking any questions. Are you comfortable taking a couple of questions from the audience?
Yeah, for sure. But I think one other discussion point that we probably have left going is so suppose we, as Mig's Machine kind of suggested, we just leave the name claims as is, and hard fork and extend the expiration. I mean, do we extend the expiration, or do we make it kind of like infinite or something? And so that's one part of it. And then the other part with the open source name claims, like, do we just let that expire, or do we just put an expiration date around it? Like, so let's say, like, a year from 6 months from now or something, or just a year from today. Like, what would be the kind of the best way to do that? And then also around these questions, how do we kind of generate community consensus around this? Do we set up like some kind of like weekly Twitter spaces to kind of do this, or do we assign some kind of committee? Like, what would be the logistics around kind of the community coming to consensus around, I guess, the most important issue, which there is consensus around, right? Which is like extending the name claims and expiring the open source developer claims at some point.
Yeah, I think to emphasize something, I think it is important to break up the discussion around firstly expiring the open source claims, and the what to do with it, right? I think the former is.
Yeah, we hear you, but maybe wait until Meow is done. And
I think it's working. Okay.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm coming at this from the perspective of an economist and the tokenomics of things. And I'm concerned that if the supply is flooded, that the price is going to drop to zero. And, what does that mean? Does that mean capitulation? I think we already have a big problem in that we're discussing giving people worthless coins, and they're worth nothing. And the way to make them worth something is to cut back the supply. And it's hard now. The ASIC miners are $3,000. Who's going to pay that for a coin that's worth nothing? So I think that the tokenomics side of things is just as important as the name side of things to make this work.
Well, real quick, asking the question of who's going to buy one. I bought an H3 yesterday, so HS3 yesterday, or a couple of days ago, and it comes in the mail like tomorrow. So, I mean,
maybe
yeah.
If you're new to the stage, if you could introduce yourselves.
Sorry, yeah.
I mean,
I'm very sorry, yeah.
For everyone that's new. No, not just so I think we all understand. If you're comfortable, at least to explain, some economists and others. We'll try our best. I know that this could be I don't know if we should put a time cap on this. I don't know how much time Andrew or Meow have, but we'll try our best to address all of this. We want to hear these insights and these perspectives. But yeah, go ahead.
To Domain's question, I think that maybe Mike, you addressed that by separating the two, the coin from the name, as a resolution to that problem.
I'm the economist. Sorry, I'm just, my Twitter Spaces is buggy, so I'm paranoid to change my settings. But I don't know who's speaking. But the economist about the worry of the supply, it is a fair point. So then, would you say the solution is burning, or I mean, what would be your solution? I think if everybody has if we could try to bring solutions as well as problems, and that would be appreciated.
Well, I think that there's too many coins. I mean, 2 billion is a whole different ballgame from Bitcoin's 21 million. And we need to make this token worth something so that people want it and people will mine for it. And the exchanges will want to list it. So I think you have to talk about burning them. I mean, I would burn whenever possible. Burn, baby, burn, I guess. We got to cut back the supply so that the coin comes up in value. Otherwise, the whole project is not going to work.
So actually, let me jump in here real quick, because in my work I deal with a lot of tokens, right, on a very daily basis. So I think I completely agree with I completely understand where you're coming from, right? Around the burning of the coins. However, obviously there's economics, right? There's supply and there's demand, right? Right. So I think it is. I think part of it. I think certainly part of the problem here is that like early on, I think there was a lot of I would say supply, right? Right, in a sense that whether it's from the claimers or the miners or whatever, right? And there's a lot of supply funding market, right? However, I would also argue that it's a demand problem, right? That I'll argue that the bigger problem for Handshake is a demand problem, right? That not that I think Handshake has a very high amount of awareness in the space. I think also extremely good credibility, right? However, I think the main thing is that I don't think enough people actually has adopted Handshake, right? Or has adopted Handshake or even used it or even tried it, right? So I think the question to and I definitely agree. First of all, I definitely agree that burn should be one of the discussion points, right? I think the way to answer that is to think about, okay, do we have a demand problem or supply problem, right? And I would argue that we have a much bigger demand problem, than supply problem, because in some sense the people with the Handshake now who want to sell it has already sold it, right? Right. And then if you think about it, right, the people who have Handshake now who has already sold it, long time ago, right? I don't really think there's anyone actively selling Handshake right now. So given that there's no one actively selling Handshake right now, why hasn't the price actually seen much progress, right? It's demand problem, right? So I think while I think burn should definitely and 100% be on the options table here, right? I do think that the much bigger question is demand. How do we drive interest, adoption, right? And demand by Handshake. I think that would be the more that would be important for me. Yeah.
So
I think
there's one there, if I could just jump in really quick. Sorry I'm blanking on a person's name, but he's been been shopping around a proposal to like somehow shorten the amount of names that can be renewed per block to create more. He says, I don't know if anybody here can help me, but I could try to find it. But he's saying that way it would create more pressure to renew, and it would increase the fees or limit the amount that could renew per block, something like this. So that would create more demand, and there would be more expirations, and there would be more bidding. That's what I apologize if he's here, it'd be great. But he's been shopping that around for a while.
I'm just concerned that when the price drops to zero, that the ball game's over.
Hey guys, do you hear me?
Okay. Does Andrew? Do you want to address this? Or Ming spoke, or Meow? Excuse me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with both sides. I see the point about too much supply, and the concerns around the price. But I do think, I mean, on the supply side, I do resonate with what Meow was saying. Like that most people that wanted to sell probably already did, and also on the supply side, the halvening just happened, so miners, so the inflation is reduced and will continue to be reduced. So I mean, most of the supply side issues I think are already addressed, except for the the supply overhang of unclaimed coins, and what to do with that, and in terms of like how it affects price in terms of reallocating and things like that. I mean, I think I think it's the community's goal to find a way to reallocate to this where there's positive EV. Where if we reallocate it to a certain group, let's say a certain amount to, like, I think Brave is like a pretty simplest example. Like, at what point is it worth, if we reallocate some coins to Brave or something, at what point is it worth it to the kind of like the price or something, right? I mean, there has to be a EV calculation there. And so instead of burning, like let's say however many million coins, what if we reallocated it to Brave and they committed to, integrating Handshake, for example? And I'm not sure that we can get the deal done, but like I think they were kind of open to it in some of the discussions I saw. And so in that discussion, like there is a point at which the value that we would receive from a browser integration would and the impact to the price would exceed. I don't know. I mean, degree like for sure, like we should allocate 50% of the coins to Brave. Like
Okay.
at some point it
So
doesn't work, but yeah.
thanks, Andrew. Sorry to interrupt. So I think we have about 30 minutes left. We've been just chatting to people about how much time people have left. So let's just try to put a 30-minute timer on this for everyone. There's also a couple people on stage that I think we haven't had a chance to share yet that I think we would like to hear from. They've been very supportive and active in the community. I think they have also different perspectives. Save the Doctor and also Andrew C. Maybe Save the Doctor. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, one thing I want to always bring up is it's very important, that we keep talking about community consensus, but how are we going to get that, And some people would make comments on, well, maybe based on TLDs, that of course becomes a problem. Some people have a bunch of TLDs, so that would really cause an issue, in my opinion, for people being able to outweigh other people's votes for no reason other than just having a lot of names. So I guess that's one of the big questions that I have. How would we come about getting a vote that would be, consensus?
Sorry, it's a little bit fuzzy for me. I think I don't know if you can get close to
No, I
your
think it was a good
Wi-Fi.
question. Like he was asking, like the mechanism for how we achieve community consensus. Like some kind of TLD vote. He said would be could be unfair. I mean, I agree. In terms of like how, and I don't know. I think that is an open question. In terms of like how we come to some conclusion, but I think one of the requirements probably for it is more like discussions, like the one we're having now. I mean, if we could have some. If there's somebody that wants to take lead on like like some regular discussions or document or something like that where people start like coming up with ideas. Traditionally what I've seen like for more technical, like I think this question is more of a business or economics type of discussion, a business side discussion than it is technical. But from like a technical perspective, like a lot of the times people propose like different hips, which whatever the community, wherever this leads would probably end up like being formalized into some hip, and that there would be some kind of voting, minor voting, or some kind of discussion around that specific hip. Right now, I think it's a little bit too abstract to like nail down into a specific document, but I think that would be the eventual goal of these discussions. A bunch of discussions lead to a proposal, and then that proposal is like voted on or discussed within the community. I think is the mechanism that we would pursue, or that's been pursued in the past.
Yeah, cool. And I think it's also, I think there's a lot of questions around, what to do with the coins. I mean, and one thing that I've really been curious about is, if there's any plans, and maybe we can talk about this in more detail, but some plans for allocating some of those coins for security testing. I think it would be really, really useful for the for the community to be able to make sure that the chain is secure, and someone can't just steal all the names per se. So.
Also, Andrew, we have gotten together as a community recently pretty regularly and started a marketing committee that looks like it's evolving into other things. And people have proposed some great ideas. And I do think that we have made some progress. And I think we're working on getting, more consistent and, really coming up with a plan to activate a lot of these ideas that we're having. So all of those things that you said, I think are in the works, and we're moving in the right direction with regard to that. But yes, in terms of coming up with a comprehensive way that everybody agrees on in terms of, how we vote or whatever else, or does somebody's vote have more weight than the other person's vote? I don't know necessarily how we'll do that. We talked about, again, creating possibly a DAO and doing some fundraising with it by having possible, buy-in, all sorts of different things that I guess we have to come to a consensus on.
There was one creative idea. I don't know if it was Save the Doctor that said it or someone else, but they said to put a text record on your TLD on chain as a vote, something like that, which I thought was pretty creative.
I
don't know
think
who said that.
Bagwell might have said something, or maybe it wasn't a text, but I think he might have mentioned something as well in one of the Discords.
Okay, great. Let's move it to Andrew. Andrew C. He's very active and always supporting Handshake all over the internet. So, Andrew, do you want to share yours? I know you have a lot of opinion.
Yeah, hello guys, do you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear
I
you.
hear.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm currently living in Norway, and Norway is a bit of a famous of having 5% of Bitcoin hash rate in our small country. And this one thing about tokenomics and about mining of Handshake coin and stuff like that, that our community is not seeing, is that from my discussion with Norwegian miners, and trying to introduce Handshake, and during a little bit of discussions about potential hard fork and DAO and stuff like that, I was explained that in case of creation of DAO, there will be basically two coin issuers on the Handshake blockchain. The first one is going to be blockchain itself. You do the work, you get the reward, you get the coin, it's fine. And the second issuer is a DAO. And with DAO, you basically don't need to do any type of work at all besides being semi-political and semi-marketing type of guy. So you basically just need to vote in order to get the rewards and allocate those rewards to any preferred third party. And the issue with doing things like this way is no one I've talked about, no one from the mining community of any decent size had any desire to join the chain and actively mine coins where there is two coin issuers, because as a miner you need to provide a lot of work before you get the reward. You need to buy the equipment, you need to set up the operations, you need to educate your staff, you need to pay taxes, you need to do a lot of stuff. And every single miner of a decent size I've talked to Norway is choosing Bitcoin because Bitcoin has this ultimate set of rules for everyone. And if we are going to miss some details with this DAO, and if we are going to create effectively two coin issuers on the Handshake blockchain, there will be a lot less attention from the mining community towards this project, because every single miner I spoke to wants to have clear rules and sort of immutable system where you provide the work and you get the reward, and there's no gatekeeper, and there is no like intermediary who can get the rewards without doing any type of work at all. So this is the biggest concern I received from the mining community in Norway. And of course, I mean, those guys are extreme maximalists, so I don't even understand how I was allowed to talk about anything apart from Bitcoin. But conclusion of that discussion was you have to avoid creating the situation where there is two coin issuers on one blockchain, because if there's an entity which mines or which just buys coins and only after that invests in any type of stuff, that's okay, that's good. But if you can increase or decrease supply by just being a cool marketing guy. That's not sustainable in the long term for any miner of a decent size.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Now we got Andrew, but Andrew Lee or Meow, do you want to comment on that or give your insight?
Oh yeah, I mean, as someone who definitely like feels, or as someone who, I mean, yeah, other than Handshake, I mean, I'm pretty maximalish, I guess. I definitely understand the sentiment around that, and yeah, and so but I mean, Handshake, I would say is like isn't, I mean, it's. Oh, I mean, I guess one of the routes that it could pursue is through some kind of DAO, um, um, or second issuer, as you kind of mentioned. I mean, I think this scenario is a little bit different in the sense that, I mean, this allocation, this airdrop to open source developer already exists. We're not inflating the supply more than what's already been defined in the rules, and it's a matter of just kind of reallocating it in terms of yeah, and I guess like one option would be, like having some foundation or DAO, which is not what I was, which I'm not like personally like, kind of in favor of. I'd rather find some way where we could get, positive EV by allocating it to a constituent that have either already proven work or demonstrate that they will do work, I guess.
Yeah, so to double down on what Andrew is saying, right? I think first of all, Andrew, thanks a lot for that perspective. I think I think we kind of like haven't talked on minors yet, right? But they're obviously kind of like the ones that would determine a lot of things. Yeah, so thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, I think the messaging here is actually very important. We are not actually issuing new coins. And even if a DAO does exist, it's actually not a coin issuance, right? It's actually more of a, of like resource allocation kind of thing, right? So I think that distinction is actually very, very important. In the sense that there would not be quote unquote new coins, right? But it's more like around like allocation of coins. And this also ties back to what Dominic was saying earlier about too much supply, right? So I think the only way to answer that question is really from the lens of EV, right? Like I think we as a community have to do things that is like expected positive EV, whether it is in terms of working organizations, or in terms of like dropping it to a community that will use it, yeah. So that's how I think about it. And another thing is that I do think that DAO question is not binary, right? Like for example, it could jolly well be such that like part a fraction of the supply goes to a organization that would be that would kind of like allocate to ongoing contributors, right? Not the entire supply. So I think I do encourage everyone not to take a binary approach to the DAO or not DAO thing. Yeah, I think there are many ways to slice the pie. Yeah, between burning, between a more like a DAO approach, or between a straight up like allocation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and I think we all appreciate Andrew Norway, your commitment for the chain. So thank you. We got about 15 minutes left. I'm chatting to Anne behind the scenes. I think there's many more that want to come up on stage or share their voices. Or Andrew Norway, do you have a comment back to theirs?
We also have Quasar, who has his hand raised, by the way. So
Andrew, yeah, go ahead if you want to reply to that.
Yeah, well, I understand that the question with DAO is not binary and it's not black and white. We can have a lot of type of potential outcomes, but we are still going to deal with the same exact type of a situation where even though we reallocate to the next big thing, which potentially can bring attention to the Handshake blockchain, but what happens if this next big thing does not bring any attention at all? Do we need to change, and do we need to reallocate those funds once again in a 4-year cycle? This is the big question, because we are, again, even though we are using all types of decentralized tools, we are manipulating the issuance of the token, because we are changing the rules. Basically, the first set of rules was this, like, we have this 45% of supply which goes to developers, and it's okay to claim whenever you want. After 4 years, we're changing to, let's say, blue sky Noster type of thing, and if it's not going to go as planned during the span of next 4 years, we are going to change the rules once again. And from the miners' perspective, this is not something that you would want to see on the layer one, which idealistically should be immutable set of rules, indestructible, and fair for anyone. So in my opinion, and from the insights of all the people I've talked to, the less hard forks and the less soft forks we are going to have moving into the future, the better.
So can you just give us your proposal? Your idea? Burn is your suggestion, or nothing, or to keep them locked?
I really like this proposal of reworking the airdrop for the developers. I don't really remember who was the guy to propose that, but I think that if we can find an option to rework and to kind of recreate the initial airdrop for the developers.
Weren't Meow and Andrew very much involved with that? I mean, you guys are both here. Weren't you guys both very involved with that decision and how it worked? Initially part of the initial experiment.
Yeah, I mean, I would say part of the initial experiment here was to create this airdrop in like the most decentralized way possible, right? You know, and the way that once it's done, kind of thing, right? You know, so have the airdrop baked into the original ethos, right? You know, of the blockchain, and we're done, right? You know, obviously the discussion now becomes like, okay, you know, now that it's 3.5 years in, you know, right? Do we wanna update that, you know? Yeah. And to Andrew's point, I think and you know, I think that definitely is a actually, Andrew, I kind of Andrew C, I kind of missed your point earlier. Are you saying you're in favor of doing something with like reallocating it to a more productive use case, or are you saying you're not? Sorry, I missed that. Sorry.
Well, basically, my proposition was to do basically the same thing, to keep to keep this set of rules as it is today, and maybe somehow rework the airdrop for the developers so that there's no issue for foreseeable future with claiming those coins.
What do you mean rework?
I don't really sure that I understand how the airdrop works from the technical side of the question, but there was this issue that some of the developers can't claim the coins because they changed the keys.
SSH keys expired. They didn't keep their keys, something like this.
Got it. So you are proposing that the rules remain exactly the same as before?
Yes, if we can have the exact same set of rules, but we can take into consideration this problem or issue with the keys.
He means like,
but Andre, I mean, I think there were like 100,000 developers that were eligible for the airdrop, and I think this stat is like 2% or something claimed, right? I could have the number, maybe it's 2 or maybe it's 3. And I think the biggest issue isn't that, like, some developers lost their SSH keys. I mean, I don't think that contributes to, like, 10% or something that would have claimed or something of that sort. I think that kind of change might get it from, like, let's say the static number is like 2%, maybe that gets it to 2.1%. But the real question is, like, what do we do with this other 98%?
So let it be like the way it was decided earlier. Like, why change?
Oh, because they're not being
Because
claimed.
it's not going to be claimed, and then we're trying to figure out a way to draw.
So yeah, to the point, right?
Wait,
Right now,
go
to
ahead,
me,
someone
like,
did.
okay.
Sorry, he's had his hand raised for a while.
Sorry, go
So,
on.
yeah, sorry.
Is that for me?
Maybe you said he,
Yeah.
but like I don't know who.
Yeah,
Maybe username
Quasar.
or something.
Yeah, this is
Okay,
Save the Doctor. I was talking.
I'm not looking at my
Quasar.
phone.
You're not looking at your phone, and I can't hear Michael when he speaks, and meow comes in and out. So I've got text on here, so the name didn't come out as Quasar. So let's play this out a little bit. If we could keep it as a handshake improvement proposal.
Maybe intro yourself if you don't mind. It's just sort of.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, yeah.
No problem.
So my name is Quasar. I've been in the blockchain and crypto space since 2017. I started with Ethereum and then found my way to Cardano. And Cardano is the UTXO model, and they actually did an extended UTXO model, and really created something unique with a hard fork combinator event. So they blend code in, they merge it into the existing protocol. So there's, you can always look back, but there's no hard fork. So establishing, what we want to do as far as hard fork, soft fork, or take the time to pursue those options, in my opinion, would be a wise way to go about it. And between the airdrop, the way that was done, and to now, the technology, the community, the growth, so much has changed that I would not even really use the numbers, the 2% or what it may be, as, we could use it as a milestone for what we do with them in the future. But we could just move the airdrop feature to a DAO, which would also allow the marketing of the airdrop. So there's no one being and Andrew, you're absolutely right. That's kind of the way DAOs are sometimes. You could do nothing and just be a schmoozer and end up getting it. But you can attach this to real, binary events. Did this happen or not? And, GitHub, too broad. GitHub Pilot, GitHub Shorts, GitHub, XYZ. How much has GitHub evolved since then as well? And then you could throw in GitLab. There's so many options on the table that I believe Handshake is in the perfect situation and opportunity to take advantage of multiple things going on, protecting the proof of work miners, and also perhaps pursuing a proof of stake integration. Handshake needs to be faster. That's, I hope no one minds me saying that, but I think it does. Move those things, move the decisions. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but keeping it as a Handshake improvement proposal would be ideal in my opinion, because if you do put it to a DAO, like our co-host said, how do we vote? What do we do? Is it token weighted? That's a conversation to avoid altogether if possible, because it's a complex one. And as an invitation or on behalf of the Cardano community, our innovation fund, Project Catalyst, is starting in next month, June 21st. There's $1 million or $1 million ADA allocated to the open source developer ecosystem. And I could see a huge opportunity for Handshake to be part of that and still fund, fuel, and ignite open source software, open source standards. There's too much at risk to not pursue it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Qatar. Does anybody want to, especially our guests like Meow or Andrew Lee, do you want to comment on those points?
No, I don't have anything. I don't have any specific comments. So.
Can I
Okay,
speak?
I think we're getting close to time. Yeah, go ahead, somebody.
So Meow and G, I would like to know what are your views on reducing the renewal blocks, like limit per year per block, to increase the demand.
Sorry,
So what?
you might say again? Sorry.
What are your views on reducing the renewal limit per block to increase the demand? Like the main problem is demand. Where to get the demands from?
Oh,
All the premium names are gone, so whoever has to buy, he can go off market and he can buy. He doesn't need coins,
oh,
right?
got it, got it. Got it. Oh yeah, actually on that note, shameless show here is like if anyone knows who owns .meow, I would really love that domain. I would
And
buy
you're
it.
gonna
I
pay
mean,
in like whatever you can pay in BTC. So it's not like too.
yeah, I mean, like, I mean, honestly, I made a mistake when bidding it. I messed up I messed it up, so I didn't buy it. I'm so sad about that. So if anyone owns .meow, let me know. All right, yeah, but to that point, yeah, I think the first problem is that do people want handshake names, right? I think that's the first question. How do we get more people to want handshake names, right? And second thing is that I do think that if enough people want handshake, if there's proven that people do want handshake names, then I think and then we really want to increase like the demand side of things, then I would agree, right? That would actually be an interesting process. I do think that putting forth that proposal right now is a little bit putting the cart before the horse, in a sense that like I think but once there is so I think two conditions, right? Two conditions that I think the community should pursue that. The first condition is that there's proven demand that people want and desire handshake names, right? The second thing is that, okay, we think that we think that we think that we are at the point whereby increase in usage and adoption of the token and increase of the utility, the technical utility of the token, right? Increase the demand, right? Then I think that discussion can happen, yeah. Mm-hmm. But for now, I feel like it's a bit early because I don't see a deep desire to buy buy names right now. But if that starts to change, then I think that's a fun discussion to have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard other discussions. If this does scale, I think even Matt Zipkin said, it would get pretty expensive even as is. If to a second like Meow, like if this does get mass adoption, the cost to renew will become more considerable. So I also am afraid to scare people off. I've also in various Twitter spaces had people upset when Namebase is announced they're not going to be giving free for life anymore because they used to just absorb the fees. Renewal fees are going to be passing those renewal fees to the end user on Namebase. So there's definitely people not happy about that. Of course, that's not in the protocol itself. That's not a Namebase side, but I think I kind of agree with Meow. Like we don't want to discourage people until we have more use case and utility of the names.
Yeah, but I think once once that utility is there, then I think a lot can be played with, on the tokenomics side of things. Yeah, no one for sure.
Mike, I know you said we were ending in half an hour. It's 8:30.
Yeah, there's
but
certain guests to have to have something. Yeah, maybe it's been an hour and a half. I think maybe we should kind of wrap up. I think we kind of accomplished the purpose of today's space was to hear from Andrew and Meow, get some of their insights and feedback. I think we've
It was
allowed
great. It was so fun. It was so fun.
people
Thank
to
you.
share. So I think we kind of accomplished it. So yeah, I think it's a good time to wrap.
We do have one more person who joined the stage, Paul Webb. Before you close, maybe he can contribute to the conversation.
Sure. Yeah, we appreciate it, Paul. I'm not sure if every guest will be staying here, but if we can, I'll stick around for that.
All right. Last but not least. All right. So yeah, I'm Paul Webb, NetOp Wibby. I own the alien emoji. Just recently got the beach emoji, so happy about that. Been in Handshake since it started, and I have thoughts. First, I've been saying this for such a long time, but focusing on token
Roll your
price
dreams.
at this point is incredibly premature still, even like 3 years in. And like it just doesn't make sense because we don't have utility like that. It's not as easy to just like spin up a WordPress blog and have it hosted and all that stuff. Once we get to that point, I don't think anybody's going to be worried about token price because the demand would clearly be there. That's just how it works. So to artificially pump the price, like we aren't Ethereum. We don't need to do things like that. We have utility. It's not DeFi. So I understand that people who have a lot of HNS are irritated seeing their thousands of HNS being worth like $20. That's fine for now, but I mean, this is long game type stuff. I wanted to comment on something Quasar said about proof of stake. That doesn't make sense for Handshake because the way that Handshake is better than HNS is security. So we need the proof of work. However, I do think that we could have an L2 that's maybe proof of stake. I don't know if that makes sense, but one of the things that we currently struggle with and newbies are especially frustrated by is that transfers take 2 entire days when on the ICANN side, a transfer can happen as soon as DNS servers propagate. So it could be minutes. It could be same day at the very least. Let's see. I don't have anything else. I just wanted to get that stuff out there. Pretty much everything else I had issues with has been mentioned, resolved. I do like the idea of separating the name claim from the coin claim because I do remember conversations with companies like, hey, we would love to get this Handshake name, but for legal reasons and we don't want the SEC on our ass, yada, yada, that stuff. So that makes sense to get more people, more companies engaged because we do need more money in the space. That would be nice. So yeah, I guess I will end by saying thanks for the discussion. It's been very enlightening. I learned some things. I do think we should check in with the Cardano stuff because they have the same kind of system we have with the UTXO stuff. So, let's steal ideas and make them work for us. All right, that's it for me.
Just a quick reminder: there will be a space on Sunday. I did post that. It's also linked up at the top. So for people that want to kind of continue the conversation, you can join. Entirely up to you. But I am also heading out. Thank you so much, Mike, SkyInclude, and everybody.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Migs. I'll be there. Yeah, so I think that's
Thank
the best way to
you.
wrap up. Yeah, we'll do another space community style. Migs will be there. I'll help out or I'll be there. Everyone's welcome to join and continue the conversation. Think about sleep on this. Think about it more. Write up some ideas. And also a little plug for the Flamingo Handshake. Anne's been helping get that going. We got some names. I think it's in about 12 hours. Check for the announced list in 24 hours, excuse me. So if you're interested now, it'd be great to support. And yeah, thanks for everybody. This was a recorded space that will be, replayable. And we appreciate all of your insights and we're listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye. Super fun. Bye-bye.
Have a nice night, everybody. Thank you.